Welcome to Vicarious Visits. I'm your host, John Marin. I'm here today with my special guest, Mike Gantzer of Aqueous.
Hello there.
So Aqueous is in town today at St. Paul. You guys are opening at the Palace Theater for Humphreys McGee on tour for your new album, Color Wheel, which just came out a week ago, actually. So,
That's right, yeah.
Welcome to town. I hope you guys are having a good time.
Thanks. We're actually really digging it here. I think the vibe reminds me a little bit of Buffalo in terms of the people.
I've heard that before. I think it's probably got something to do with the same kind of climate.
Yeah, I think there's some commonalities happening there, but we've been very comfortable here so far.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you're having a good time. So let's just jump right into it. Before we get started, for anybody not familiar with the band, it's pronounced Aqueous.
That's right, people. Aqueous.
So tell me a little bit about the band for people who aren't familiar. Where did you guys come from? How long you've been together?
So, yeah, we're a rock band out of Buffalo, New York, and we formed about 2006, 2007, like right at the tail end of high school. And we pretty much spent the next 10 years or so kind of grinding and turning it into what it is now, which is like kind of a full-time, a couple hundred, shows a year. Well, I guess about 130, 140 shows a year, kind of full-time gig for us. So, yeah, that's kind of our thing.
How'd you guys arrive on the name Aqueous?
That's a good question. So Dave, our guitarist, was a chemistry major when we were in school. He went to college for that, and I think he was already kind of into the sciencey stuff. And I think being a young jam band, we thought, like something that, that term means something that's soluble in water or dissolvable in water. We're like, our jams are like water or something stupid like that.
Very fluid.
Being like very fluid. That was the concept. And we were like, 15 or 16, and it just felt like a unique name. And we'd never, heard of a band named that. And it just felt kind of right, in terms of our identity.
It was definitely an attractant when I first started listening to you guys.
Nice.
Generally, for me, anytime that a band picks a name that's extremely interesting, to me, you better have some interesting music to back up the name. So.
I like that. That's a good point.
For somebody who hasn't heard Aqueous before, how would you describe your music to them?
That's always been a tough one for me. I mean, I think that even on this new record, Color Wheel, you could skip around tracks and get some pretty distinctly different impressions of what our band is. I think we do have a sound. I think if someone were to come to a show, I think they could get a true sense of what that sound is, and I think that's the best way to experience it or to listen to a record. But I mean, I think is rooted in rock and roll. I think that's a big part of our foundation, and we've always called it groove rock as like a just sort of all-encompassing term. Even though there's some subtleties to some of the styles that we get into that it doesn't quite cover it, but I think a lot of it is it's meant to be hard hitting, but also meant to make you dance and to be groove based, and also lyrically we've tried to write from an authentic place. The past 5 or 7 years we've tried to write about true things in our lives or true emotions, and it's a lot about honesty for us. But I guess musically it's kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of things these days. There's elements of electronic music, there's rock and roll, there's hip hop sounds, there's like reggae sounds on occasion, it's funk, neo soul. We're into so many things.
One thing I love is you guys aren't afraid to shred in a jam, and I think that a lot of jam bands kind of get this like melodic feel where they're like afraid to really throw down. I mean, that was something that always attracted me to Mo. Was how they like to shred.
They do like to shred,
and I think you and Dave sometimes get going, and I'm guitar rocking when I'm listening. So
thanks, man.
How would you say your sound has grown and changed over the years?
I think specifically in the past few years, especially since Rob joined the band, our drummer Rob. We've started to experiment with the more electronic or hip hop based sounds in a subtle way. I mean, it's not some crazy thing where it's like over the top, but we're very influenced by some of those artists that are in that genre and that realm. And Rob is very fluid in that style, and Evan our bassist has been getting into like more of like a keyboard bass. Like he has this instrument called a Moog Sub Fatty, and it's like lower end kind of sub octave sounds. So we've been kind of blending that with our normal rock, standard rock sound. And that's been pretty interesting, especially from a guitar standpoint, because it's a totally different approach like it's more about layers then, and a guitar is typically less featured. And I'm super cool with that. I like experimenting with textures, with my effects pedals and finding like cool delays or like trippy sounds or stuff that doesn't even sound like a guitar. Sure. I think that's really fun. And I think it's important to grow and experiment and try things as long as you're paying respect to the music that you're dabbling in. You know what I mean? Like
there's a fine line there for sure, especially in today's music. It's easy to go too far in one direction or the other.
Yeah, and I think even just having a general history or like getting at least like if you're going to dabble in a genre, say you ask yourself like what are the main artists that have contributed to this sound, and like that's something I think about. Like I want to, if I'm going to like play something, I really want to understand it, in even like just at least have a general sense and really a sense of respect for like what came before, like what is the main thing that contributed to that music becoming what it is, in whatever genre, you know what I mean?
So, and that kind of leads well into the next topic, talking about your personal background. I guess, what were your influences as you were learning your craft?
I mean, the biggest thing for me, right out of the gate was like I was a skateboarder, and that was the thing I was most passionate about in my life. And when I was 11 or 12 and 13, and I discovered so much music through that. It's a very artistic culture, and a lot of the skateboard videos that I would watch, these old VHS tapes from like these companies like Birdhouse and Element and all this, had such rad music. I mean, I heard David Bowie and Queen for the first time in a skateboard video, and I was introduced to Gangstar, which is like one of my favorite hip hop groups of all time, and then of course like all the punk music like Bad Religion and Pennywise and all that sort of angsty rock and punk rock. I was really influenced by like when I first started playing guitar. That's why I wanted to play. And then my dad was a musician, and he sort of influenced me to listen to like more classic rock and prog sounds, so like Pink Floyd and Steely Dan, and I guess from there it was like some of the prog sounds would be like Gentle Giant or King Crimson, or he took me to see Yes when I was 12, and that was like pretty mind-blowing. And so I think that was the basis. Before I got into any jam band stuff, I was like kind of a like little punk kid, and that was really fun. I love the whole culture, and I still think about that sometimes. Even on stage, like there'll be certain moments or improvs where I'll take it in that direction, we'll get fast or heavy, and I think it's really fun.
And I guess that kind of leads then to the next question. How did you know when you were going to pursue music and not skateboarding or working at a burger shop or something else?
I did always want to work at a burger shop. That's a good question. I pretty much as soon as I picked up a guitar, it was kind of game on. I don't know what it was about that instrument. I mean, previously I had played trumpet in like high school jazz band, but I wasn't really moved by that, or actually middle school at that point, and I just really wasn't. I think I quit by freshman year of high school. And my dad had a guitar lying around the house, and he was a keyboard player primarily, but had a guitar too. And I would kind of like take it out and mess around with it when he was at work. And there was just something that really resonated for me about that instrument. It felt like I could express myself, and especially at that age, like that's an age of a lot of change. And I think that skateboarding was still there. I would still do it, but it kind of fell by the wayside because with the progression in that sport, you need to like basically hurt yourself to you know what I mean? You have to try crazier and crazier things, sure. And more stairs or longer rails or whatever any of this stuff was. And I was never like that. I was a kid, I didn't progress that far. But if I wanted to follow that, it was a bit of a choice because on the guitar, like I can't have a broken wrist, like
sure.
If I'm, and so I think that there was just this natural attraction to that instrument. I just felt like I had a voice on it, and at that age I had a lot of change in my family life too, and there was some not that easy things going on for me, and the guitar was like the answer to all of that. And so I just spent all of my hours pouring whatever issues were there into that instrument, and I became like super obsessed, and I've really never looked back.
So now that you're an official professional musician, what do you listen to now? Where do you get your influence from currently?
I mean, I've been really into folk music lately, if you can believe it. I've been very into like songwriters and thinking about music more as a message. I think it's important to be in touch with that side, beyond musicality or beyond progressive sounds or whatever. I think music is also a language, and I feel like I've been drawn recently towards like bands like Fleet Foxes or Wilco, and like even like going back to like I'll listen like all the time in the van to that like Simon and Garfunkel Live in New York City record. It's like one of my favorites. So I've been doing a ton of that, and also like it's funny on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Like someone got me into Chon, that like crazy guitar shred band, and I like that. I think they're amazing, but I would really only listen to that for a few songs at a time.
Sure.
I just haven't been, like as into that. But there's a little bit of that. I recently got into this band that Anthony from Papadozio turned me on to called Little Tybee, and they're somewhere Georgia based. I'm not exactly sure what city, but their self-titled album I've been listening to a ton. Snarky Puppy and all the spin-offs of that, like Ghost Note and Mark Letary and all kinds of shit, really.
So let's talk about Color Wheel for a little bit here. That's Color Wheel just came out on October 12th. So it's just been a week now. It's your first studio album since 2014.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it's been typically like a year or two in between each one. Is there a reason why there was such a longer pause between these two?
Yeah, of course. It was our drummers. We were in a position where we had lost our longtime drummer, the one that had done the one that came out in 2014, Cycles. He left the band at that time, and the next 2 or 3 years were spent scrambling, trying to find the right person. And
it was a good album to lose a drummer right after.
Yeah, I think that there's a tension in that record of, like a darkness, an optimism, but a darkness in that record that I hear when I listen to it. That one time I listened to it. It's funny because we are very ambitious, like as far as everybody is always inspired and always writing, and we had material. We're spending time like reteaching somebody our catalog each time.
Sure.
And we went through a few drummers in a really short amount of time just because, the first scenario was that unfortunately a longtime friend, Ryan Nogel, who played for about a year, ended up having like really bad issues with his elbows and could not perform at the amount that we were performing. It was taking a physical toll on him, and then we had someone else come in and just like swapping out, and so basically as soon as Rob joined the band, we knew that like he was such a good fit right from the get-go that we felt confident reapproaching the studio. And actually around that time, which I think was like 2016, he joined the band, and 3.5 months later or 4 months later we put out an EP. We did a studio effort, but it was only four songs, and like we love the studio. Like I making records is like a great joy in life for me. Like I wish sometimes that it was 1978 and that people still really cared about that, and that we could maybe tour like slightly less and just be in the studio all the time, like creating, because it's such a different expression in music, and I really love it. But it's nice to have everything back super on track and to be able to create freely with the band. It's been awesome.
So, and does that, I guess, for jam bands, a lot of times when they come out with a new studio album, you're already familiar with the entire album. Right. Not so much the case with this one. This is a lot of stuff that you haven't performed live before. How has that approach been taken differently in comparison to how others do it?
That was exactly the goal, is we wanted to avoid that. We wanted it to be exciting and to give people a reason to listen to it and to present the songs the way that we intended them. You know what I mean? Because when you're in a live setting, the goal is to have it be loose and languid, and you're expressing and you're exploring. But in the studio, you have the song, and the song has a purpose, and you have to figure out how to best get that across. And I think this time around we like really prioritized that, and especially like having all these songs that we hadn't played gave us the opportunity to really discover like what the purpose of the song was and what should fit. And it was like really awesome. It was like it was a great experience to get to like be in a studio and make these choices, because previously, like we were like a lot of those other, a lot of jam band stuff is where there's songs that you've heard a million times and they're condensed. And people typically like that less, I think. It's like, oh, this isn't the version I know, And so I thought it'd be cool to not work backwards anymore, like to like say, okay, like let's just put this out, start here with like the best version of this in the studio, and then what can we build on that live? And we've wanted to do that forever, and it was very hard to sit on these songs and tour. Luckily we're at a point where we've been a band long enough that we have a decently wide repertoire, but it was killing us to not debut. I mean, for a band like us, we write, like I said, we write all the time, and there's always demos being sent and ideas being worked on, and it was really hard to keep that under our hats.
Well, I know for a lot of bands, the crowd feedback is part of the creative process in growing a song too. So
yeah, and it was interesting. I feel like it was kind of nice to know that we could achieve something that we feel great about, this record, without that. This was just strictly our vision, as a band, and there wasn't that. And I'm really happy with what we did on it.
You guys you have a huge presence on social media. You interact with your fans regularly on Facebook, host tons of your own videos on YouTube, live audio on nugs.net. How do you think, and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but how do you think that social media has played into your success as a band?
It's a crucial element. I mean, it's something you have to really come correct on these days and take seriously, because it's where everybody is. And I have my own feelings about that. I sometimes think that it's not necessarily the best place for humans to spend most of their existence on. But I guess putting that aside, I think that it's an amazing opportunity as a band in 2018 to be able to have this direct outlet, or this voice online that is immediately reaching all these people. I think it's something that bands should really take seriously, and we do, and it's really fun for us. I mean, I like the part I do like is interacting, like when there's live videos or people will ask us questions and we can interact with them through that medium. I think it's a great way to stay in touch with your fans, or stay grounded and rooted, where they can feel like they know us a little bit more, or they get a sense for our personalities or who we are. Because the band, we're just all very long-time friends, and I like letting people into that world a little bit, of just seeing us nerd out and make jokes at each other and just be silly. I think it's important to let people in on that a little bit, and I think we talk a lot about making sure we're always putting out fun content and keeping our page really fun. And we spend a lot of time and money on making these silly little videos for tour announcements and stuff, recreating Spinal Tap or Wayne's World or something.
But it keeps the rapport up.
No, I love it. Yeah, it's a great, that's we laugh sometimes that's what we'll spend our time on. But I think that for us it's fun, and you got to have fun, and it gives people a reason to keep checking you out and stay fresh. And you can't just beat people over the head with the same standard image, this show is then with this time, and just data gets kind of old. And I think it's fun to try to figure out better ways to engage people.
This question comes from Mike Hatshaw on Acquaintances, and it kind of ties in with the social media and the release of the new album. But so there's all these songs that people haven't really heard yet, and after just a week, how cool is it that fans are already posting videos of covers? I mean, they're eating it up.
That's an honor, man. I mean, I feel like any musician has a place in my heart, and I think that it's wild to see people feeling inspired by this music or influenced by this music to the point that within a week's time they're going to learn something. Quick. It's really quick, and to me that's a great sign that they're connecting with it, and that's all we've ever wanted. And yeah, it's a true honor. So thank you to those people that have done that, and thank you, Mike, for the question. It's great.
You're definitely well known for sit-ins and collaborations. I did a YouTube search yesterday and just searched for with Mike Gantzer.
Oh, okay, how'd that go?
Dopapod, Mo, Twiddle, Talk, Pigeons Playing. I mean, the list goes on. I could sit here all day long. So when I first started listening to you, Rob Campa was a big influence. Anytime that Rob talks about you, he always says you're one of his favorite guitarists. So I mean, that's a big honor. That is a big honor. How do you? It's not like anybody can just say, "Hey, I want to get up on stage and play with it." How do you approach sit-ins and collaborations? Do people come to you? Do you come to people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if there's any young musicians out there watching this, you don't ask. You never ask to sit in. That's not how that's supposed to go. It's just this unspoken thing in the music community. If they want you as part of their thing that night, they'll ask you. You don't ask. But so yeah, I think it comes from an openness. And I think for me, I think a lot about respect when I step on stage with another band, because it's their world that they've invited me into. It's not my world that is revolving around me. And so I like the idea of taking a moment to assess what's happening on stage, and I tend to just listen as widely as I can, keep my ears wide open, because I think it's easy for guitarists to be guitar-centric, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that there's so much more happening on stage. I love rhythm, I love drums, I love bass, and so what my goal is to communicate on an honest level, like when I'm on stage, and I'll try to have these little moments where I show someone that I'm listening to them, but not stepping on their toes. It's like this kind of fine dynamic that you tread. But I find it very joyous. I always just try to do things that'll make people smile and engage in the band smile and get the band engaged. And I like to, depending on the scenario, if it's something I know I have a heads up on, I'll try to scramble to do homework on the tune and find little ways to add a part or something, or add little things where I think it's appropriate or not over the line. But for me, the main thing is just to stay loose up there and just kind of keep my eyes and ears wide and just engage the band.
For anybody who hasn't seen it, I did a video with you sitting in with Dopapod playing PLSS in Denver a couple of years back, and you came in at the beginning of the song, and Rob just walked off stage and let you play, and you played the whole song. And I mean, I could have closed my eyes and never known that it was a guest sitting in with the band. So I think you definitely, I think, have to have that receptiveness to take a back seat but be willing to step forward at the same time.
Yeah, I just think you just have to be open and willing to adapt and bend and get a good feel of what the band is about. And I think specifically with Dopapod too, I mean that we go back pretty far with them these days, and I think that there's a rapport there beyond any of that. I think there's just a friendship that allows other things. And that night was interesting because I was not ready for that.
You were running around town that night.
Yeah, and I we had played a show that evening, and I had come over there just because I love those guys, and I wanted to just catch a set. And Rob never tells me when that's never talked about. He just sees me in the audience, and he's like, "Come up," and I'm like, "Whoa, I'm not in that mode," you know what I mean? And to get up there and play a completely different guitar that I've never played, a different rig, and that's an interesting thing. And he always kept me on my toes. You can tell that
he's genuine, that he likes you though, because when he sees you, he's like, "Oh, get up here!"
No, it's so great. I'm really grateful. He's the only one I've ever known that's done it that way, and I think it's awesome. It's very, very Rob, and Rob has become one of my best friends in the past few years. We've gotten really close, and he's a good human being.
What are some of your favorite sit-in moments?
I think recently the Mo one was pretty magical for me, just on a lot of levels, because I grew up being a big fan of that band, and there was just I had recently connected with Chuck Garvey of Mo, I invited him to a festival to do a Pink Floyd set with me. Him and I and Eli from Dopapod and Matt from Munyon and our bassist Evan. And so we got to spend a little bit of time together, rehearsing for that and obviously playing the show, Chuck and I. And I think that we've been getting more and more comfortable around the Mo guys. I think we looked up to them for a long time, and I think you're a little sheepish, you just want to make sure, that you're doing things right. And but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I was a lot less nervous this time. It was my second time sitting in with them, and I felt like I could breathe. I felt because I remember the first time they asked me, it was out of nowhere. Was not planning on that at all. We had opened for them for the first time in February of this year, and I was about to wheel my stuff off stage after our opening set, and they're like, "Oh, they want you to sit in tonight. Leave your amp up there." I was like, "What?" So I think that time I was it went great, but I was just maybe a little bit nervous.
Was that Mexico?
No, the most recent one was Mexico. That other one was Waiting for the Punchline.
That Mexico performance was incredible.
Thanks. And so, but this time I did kind of some of that. They told me the day of, when we got there, they had known that they wanted to have me up, and so they told me what song, and I was able to sit in the van and make sure I knew the parts, and I added a little third part harmony and made it sound like an Allman Brothers song or something. And it was great. It was so awesome. So I'd say recently that was my favorite one. And actually, I think one of my other favorite experiences in that realm was with some of these Humphreys guys, Chris and Stasek, and I had did a Green Day set at summer camp a few years ago, and that was pretty rad too, because of my roots as a 13-year-old punk kid.
Anybody you hope to get a chance to play with?
I'd like to at some point do a jam with Humphreys. I have not sat in with them. Which is cool because there's a lot of guitar going on there already. I think a lot of times for sit-ins for them you see more horns and stuff. But whatever, I that would just be a cool thing for me. But and I'm sure there's a lot of other bands if I really sat down and thought about it. There's so many amazing bands in the scene. But I guess off the top of my head, because we're 5 feet from Humphreys Green Room, my answer is Humphreys.
Any chance we're going to see some more Compa Gantzer solos?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's more just a scheduling thing when both of us, have the time and we can work it out logistically. We love doing that. I mean, that's an interesting gig. Like 2 acoustics and no songs is like a lot of risk. You have to have a lot of trust to just go and sit down and try to entertain people for an hour at a time playing completely improvised acoustic music. It's a completely different approach. And it's awesome.
I would think the people that are showing up there, though, are really interested to hear what you guys are doing.
Those people get it.
So coming up next, I know you guys have a Halloween show at the Knitting Factory. You're back in the upper Midwest at the end of November with dates in Ann Arbor, Chicago, Milwaukee. And then you have a New Year's Eve show at Buffalo.
Yes.
So what are you looking forward to wrapping up the year?
I just can't wait to get back out on the road. I mean, we've been in studio mode, and we had festivals all summer, and there's been a couple of plays like through September and early October, but we really haven't been on the road as how we normally are, and that started yesterday. So we're out here for these 2 shows, and then come Tuesday night we leave for Connecticut, and then we're out until Thanksgiving. And I am just stoked for this whole tour. I think this is a really cool time for the band, and we're feeling very inspired with finally getting to play all this stuff. It's such it's very exciting because we have no perception of what these songs can become in terms of improv, and so that's going to be there's going to be so much exploring and discovery on this tour, and the support bands that we have throughout the whole tour are awesome. We spent a lot of time, we're making sure we found people that were, bands that were a great fit and were a great bill. We have Munyon and the Heavy Pets and Goose and EGI, all these really cool bands supporting us throughout the tour, and to close it out in Buffalo is going to be sick too. We're doing our first VIP set the night before, and that sold out already, and so that'll be cool because that room, Nietzsche's in Buffalo, we have a lot of roots there. I'm looking forward to all of it, honestly. I just can't wait to tour again.
And then finally, what advice would you give to people looking to follow in your footsteps?
I guess I would say stay patient and stay nice and kind and non-jaded if you can, because I think that this is not an easy path. I think that people think it's one thing and it's another. It's great. It's wonderful. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody out there, but it's a lot of work, and it stays a lot of work. And I think that the sense that I get even touring with some of the bigger bands that we'll support, it's the same thing, just on a bigger scale. And so I guess I would just say, just be nice to sound guys. Be nice to each other and communicate. I think that's one of the biggest problems that a lot of bands run into, is that it's hard sometimes to say the thing you need to say, and they'll let it stew or let it sit, and then they'll just explode or have some crazy issue. And luckily we've been at this long enough that we've figured out ways to communicate efficiently and kindly and with tact. But I just say, no matter what, if you really want it, go and get it, and don't let anybody tell you that that you can't. It's up to you. You can manifest anything, I think. I kind of believe that. I think you just got to keep at it.
I think you have to really know what it is that you want, and not guess at what you want to.
Right.
I think that's part of it.
And just focus and not put your eggs in too many baskets. Just find the one thing and go completely all in on it.
So the album Color Wheel is out now. It's available everywhere in stores. I mean, I was looking online, and you can stream it or buy it anywhere that you can find music.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about Aqueous, check out aqueousband.com. Mike, I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely, man.
Stay tuned to Vicarious Visions for more music, interviews, and live streams. Be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. And pay attention to Aqueous. These guys are making some big moves in the music scene. So
cheers, man. Thanks
for your time, Mike.
Absolutely.